And so it's definitely pretty hard for you guys to see the lines she is drawing, but they're just kind of loose, kind of flowy geometric mountain shapes. When she's done sketching them out, maybe you can pull the canvas a little closer just so they can see. Pencil, turns out pencil's really hard to see on a computer screen. This is what I'm learning in our new world.
That's what you're saying with the kids drawing too, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do a kids drawing class every Thursday, and it's pencil drawing, and I immediately realized that the kids could not see anything I was doing, so I had to switch to Sharpie. It was dynamic.
All right. So, like I said, just super, super loose, but you can kind of see.
You can see that pretty good, yeah.
Yeah. So, honestly, the trees I'm going to end up painting over right away, but just to kind of have that thought or, you know, that space in my head of where they're going to be. So there's like a little tree right here, and then I did 2 trees right here, and just to kind of make it interesting, like in this painting,
Yeah, you're pretty sad.
So I kind of put the tree sort of going up in front of the mountain, kind of like this one. And that kind of makes it just a little bit more interesting, kind of like bringing the foreground up in front of you and then making the mountains look more like a background. So, yeah. Definitely have to get that looked at. So that was just a super quick sketch. And like I said, we're going to basically paint over the trees right away. But those are just to kind of have it in my head, like that's kind of generally where I want the trees to go. And then I just put where I wanted it might even be more of a moon, we'll see, but where I put my orb in the sun. So, hopefully everyone has their palette dialed in. And so now we're going to kind of just dive into our color mixing for a minute. Your smaller brush, whatever size that is, that's going to be your best brush to mix with. And I will say that typically I don't necessarily need to rinse out my brushes very often because I have so many, so I'll just like pick another one. But I will say that in this instance, you're going to want to make sure it's really rinsed out before you dive into mixing another color, because it's pretty easy for, say, once you have made your orange, for instance, to then rinse your brush out. Maybe it's not all the way clean though, and then you go to make your, we'll say, purple, and that little bit of that orange color might make it more of like a brown. So you're just going to want to make sure that you wash out your brush pretty well. Or if you have several, then by all means with this mixing, you can use several brushes. But if you only have one, you're going to want to make sure you rinse it out really well. And what helps a lot with that is if you just have your paper towel, you're going to rinse it out in the water and then just wipe it off. And then you can just tell each time you rinse it how clean it is. And obviously, if there's no color, then you're good to go mixing another color. So I'm going to start mixing my orange, because that's what I'm going to use for, I think for my sky. We'll just go with that. So what I'm going to do is, what I do is I have a spray bottle that I use for painting a lot, and that's something that I use to kind of keep my palette wet. You could get your brush wet in the water as well, which is what I just did too. So either way, if you have a spray bottle, it's totally not necessary. You just dip your paintbrush in water, and then you're going to want to pull some of your yellow, just kind of scoop it a little bit, kind of like that, and put it right in the middle between the red and the yellow. And then same kind of thing with that red. You're just going to scoop a little bit of the red and put it right into the yellow, just like that. And so you'll see once we start building our palette, you're going to have your orange in the middle of your red and yellow. You're gonna have your purple in the middle of your red and your blue. And your green will kind of be over here on this other side just because that's how the cookie crumbles. And then, so you're just going to want to mix that up. And if it's a little bit, it might even be just like a different shade of red, which is kind of what mine's turning into. So if that's the case, just kind of rinse your brush out a little bit and add more yellow. It's really just kind of a happy medium between finding what shade of orange you like. So I'm going to grab a little bit more yellow. I'm just mixing that into my red. And that's definitely making more of an orange color. And then one of the things that I found that makes it easier to kind of really get that mixed color to pop is then to add some white. So I'm going to rinse my brush out. And it really does help if you wipe it on a paper towel. And then I'm going to scoop a little bit of the white and I'm going to put that in my orange. So you can kind of see how that's starting to look a little bit more like orange, especially with the white in there. There we go. So that's our orange. So now I'm going to rinse my brush out really good. I wonder if I just have too much. I don't have enough space on the computer.
I don't know.
What happened?
It just like, or my network.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just got mad and didn't want to do anything.
Really?
Yeah, like totally frozen
I really hope
during a Zoom call.
Yeah, I feel like we underestimate how much energy that takes for a computer, though.
I got this computer because I got like more space for stuff. We're talking about computers. I don't know if anyone else is encountering computer life problems. Like now that we have to rely on our computers for almost everything, you really notice when they don't perform.
Yes, mine has been acting up, so I'm a little worried about it. But so anyway, so we have our orange now in between our red and yellow. And now we're going to kind of roll on over to purple. So, and I'm sure a lot of people know this already, but just in general, we started with our primary colors and just super basic color theory. So what we're mixing would be the secondary.
Secondary, yes.
I was going to say tertiary. That's funny. So these are secondary colors. So you're going to want to take, I would say actually quite a bit more red than blue in this instance because blue doesn't really take very much to make purple. So I'm just going to scoop a little bit of that red, just like I did with making the orange. I'm going to put it right in the middle of the blue and the red. I'm going to rinse my brush out. Or I might not even do that. I'm just going to scoop the blue. And not as much of the blue as the red. And let's see, there we go. And I'm gonna mix that into the red. So in a lot of ways, you can kind of see how the blue is acting sort of like black. The dark colors really don't take as much as the lighter colors to mix a different color. So yeah, a little bit of that blue really made quite a bit of a difference for the purple. So we're going to do the same thing we did with the orange where once we have our purple mixed up, and again, you can kind of decide, well, maybe I want it to be a little bit warmer purple, and in that instance, then you'd add a little bit more red. Or if you want it to be a cooler purple, because purple is sort of a whole range, it can go warm to cool, in my opinion. So depending on what color, what shade you like. And then I'm going to rinse my brush out. And then I'm going to do the same thing I did with the orange and pull just a little bit of white into that purple. And it'll really make that color that we mixed pop. All right, so I'm going to take a little bit of my white again. I'm going to put that right in the purple. And one of the things that I noticed with mine, and just because of the certain color of blue that I have or the certain color of red, is that my purple kind of turned, it is sort of more of a gray purple, which I ended up adding just a tiny bit more red to mine. So you can kind of see it is a little bit more grayish than maybe like a brighter purple. So I'm just going to add a little bit more red to mine. And that'll just give it a little bit more of a warmer color of purple. Awesome. So there's our purple. And then now all we have to do is green, and green is pretty simple. Again, you're not going to want very much blue when making your green because it doesn't take very much. So I'm going to rinse my brush out one more time. We're going to mix one more color, and then we're going to dive in. So now I'm going to move over to my yellow right here. And I'm actually going to I'm going to scoop my yellow up. Put it right in between the yellow and the black. And then I'm just going to take a tiny bit of blue with the corner of my brush. About that much. I'm going to mix that in with my yellow right here. And you can see that it really doesn't take much at all to make a green. And then I'm going to actually leave this color green the way it is without adding white to it like we did the other ones, just because towards the end, since the trees are in the foreground, that's going to be one of the last colors I use, and I'm going to end up wanting to use several different shades of green, so I'm going to keep it this darker green to start off with, and then as we get to the end of our painting and start painting our trees, I'm going to add a little bit of white to it to kind of get different shades of green. So that's our green. And I'm actually going to add just a little bit more yellow to my palette really quick. And then we're pretty much good to go with color mixing. So we have our purple, orange, and green that we just mixed. And then we have our other colors that just came from our tubes. So I'm going to add some more yellow and then we'll start painting. Is everyone getting colors?
I think it looked, I just snooped. I just was snooping on everyone, looking at your videos for the people who have it turned on. It looked like everyone was working hard on mixing colors. Do you guys need a minute to get your colors situated? If you do, just shout it out in the chat option and we'll pause. But if not, we'll just keep rolling.
Okay. Awesome. Cool. So,
oh, here we have a question.
Awesome.
Green is too pale. Like,
too pale.
Like minty pale or like yellowy lime pale? Or I can turn you on, Christy. Or yeah, Chris. How do I?
Too pale. Does it have maybe too much yellow in it? That could be it. Maybe you need a little bit more blue. Right here.
Yeah. All right. No. Wrong person. Wrong person.
There we go.
Chris, do you want to hold your palette up and we can take a peek and see what you're dealing with?
I'm adding more blue, but
Oh, yeah.
It's getting to be bright green. It's still staying like this, like sagey kind of.
More
Sagey.
yellow.
Maybe a little bit more yellow.
The sage is a nice color, but if it's not what you want, then
So
yeah.
that kind of thing. So the sagey kind of green is all kind of what was happening with my purple, where it had kind of a grayish tint to it. It wasn't like super vibrant. So that was just the combination of the type of blue that I had and the type of red, because I guess the type of blue that I had isn't actually like true blue, if that makes any sense. The blue that I was using is a phthalo blue. So that's there, it could depend on, the tint of the color that you have.
Yep.
So if it isn't as bright as you'd like it to be, with the green specifically, I would add a little bit more yellow, and that should make it more vibrant.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of it is just going to come down to the colors that you're starting with.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Awesome. Looks like everyone's still kind of mixing a little bit.
Yeah.
Yay. I like the idea of a sage green, though.
I do too. I love sage green.
Yeah, it's very Montana now.
Yeah. Especially right now when it's like not everything is bright yet. Everything's still like coming out of winter.
We're about to be in bright green mode,
Mm-hmm.
which is it's definitely one of my favorite times.
I hope soon.
Yes.
I'm ready for bright green mode.
No more snow.
No more snow.
We don't want any more snow.
Here, let me pin you back.
Awesome. Cool. Okay. So, if everyone's pretty good on the mixing and happy with their colors, we're gonna start painting. So, what I'm gonna start with is just my plain yellow is what I'm gonna start with. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna dive into that the way it is right out of the tube. And I'm just going to do the sky very, very loosely. And I'll show you how I do that. Just keep it really loose. It definitely doesn't have to be perfect by any means. We're going to be doing a couple layers. And that's typically how I paint. So just really have fun with it. That's the beauty of this brush, is you can make some really fun marks. You can keep it loose, especially with abstract painting. It's just, the most important thing is just to keep it fun. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to start with just my normal yellow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip my foam brush in the water just a tiny bit. And I'm going to mix that a little bit on my palette and get it a little bit more fluid so that when I put that first layer on, it's not going to be super thick. So it'll dry rather quickly. And that's something that we kind of want to keep in mind, especially with this painting process and only having so much time, is you don't want to be putting paint on super thick until the end, because with adding layers, you want to make sure your layers are going to dry rather quickly. So I'm going to dip my foam brush in some water. And also just a tip as well, if after your color mixing your water is brown or dark, I would maybe just switch it really quick, because when we're working with the lighter colors, that's going to actually change the color of your paint, which you don't want, especially when you're working with white. When you're working with white, especially just plain white, you want it to be super clean water, because otherwise your white's going to turn to gray. So I'm going to take my wet foam brush and I'm just going to mush a little bit of the yellow onto my palette just to kind of get it a little bit more fluid. You can see there's a little bit of water on my palette right there.
Do you see the spray bottle question? We could probably talk about it at some point.
Yes. So for me, I use the spray bottle in a lot of different ways, but in this capacity, I'm just using it to spray my palette to keep my paint from drying, because acrylic paint is awesome in the fact that it dries really quickly when you're working in layers, but when you're working for your palette, you don't want it to dry on your palette when you're mid-painting. So for me, in this capacity, I'm using my spray bottle just to kind of do a couple squirts on my palette to keep my paint pretty wet. not fluid or dripping by any means. You want it to stay where it is on the on the palette, but it's just helping my paint from getting crusty or drying out. And then just in general, when I'm painting, not necessarily in a paint party capacity, but because time wouldn't allow for the painting to dry in time. But for me, just my own process, I use a spray bottle 80% of the time in the very beginning. That's how I build a lot of layers, and I do a lot of finger painting. So a lot of times what I'll do is after I've mushed a lot of paint around on the canvas with this brush, I'll use my fingers as well, and then I'll spray on the canvas and let it drip. And that's another sort of way that I love to layer paint. I just love letting the paint drip and do its own thing. It's such an interesting process to me. So, and it really allows you to kind of let go. So if you do want to experiment with the spray bottle and you have one, I would suggest doing it another time, just in the sense that in this capacity, and if you're trying to kind of paint something similar to what the reference image was, it won't allow the canvas to dry in time for us to work on it. So when I'm usually adding those first layers with the spray bottle, I'm usually working on multiple paintings. That way I, make a layer with the spray bottle and of paint, and then I set that aside, and then I start working on something else and do that same kind of thing with that one, and then switch back and forth. And that allows for each canvas to have some drying time. So in this capacity, because we only have so much time, the spray bottle doesn't necessarily work well for the dripping and everything, because you do need time to dry. Whereas I'm just using it to kind of keep my palette wet, which you can do equally as well, just dipping your brush in water and making your paint fluid on the palette. Yes.
You ummed.
Yes, thinking. So I have my yellow that I've kind of made a little bit more fluid on my palette. So now I'm just going to dive into the sky and make it super loose. And one of the things that I also like to do that helps it look a little bit more like a sunset, and I think we're really lucky living up here in Big Sky, or even just the mountains. We get a lot of amazing sunsets. And one thing I've noticed is as the sun is going down, the light directly behind the mountains, like right above the mountain line, is a lighter color. And then as you get farther up in the sky, that tends to be a little bit darker. So for instance, in this piece, you can see how the lightest color yellow is right up against the mountain tops. And then kind of around the edge of the canvas is a little bit darker, more of those oranges and reds. So that kind of creates more of a sunset vibe and also a nice contrast with the mountains, where you have that dark blue outline of the mountains, and then you have the bright contrast of that yellow or lighter orange. So that's kind of what I'm going to try and do with this painting as well. It's not going to look exactly like this, but it'll be the same kind of idea. So I'm going to start using some of that yellow right next to the mountains.
So almost kind of like you're outlining.
Kind of. You could call it outlining, just the tops of the mountains. And again, it can be super loose. If you paint over your sketch that you did, totally fine, because you can always go over that line or fill in that with that darker blue color, and you won't even be able to see the yellow. So it can be super, super loose. So now you can kind of see, and I even just painted over my tree sketch right here, totally fine. Because I kind of, in my brain, I have that memorized where I kind of want that tree to be generally. So now that I sort of have that just base yellow out of the tube color, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of that yellow into that yellow a little bit of that white into that yellow color, just to make it a little bit lighter. And if your paint is a little bit thick, kind of like that, then, or it looks like that on your brush, then I would just kind of dip your brush in water a little bit and make it just a little bit more fluid. And again, that's just going to help us with our layers, have them dry a little bit quicker. So that should be just a little bit lighter yellow, maybe a little bit more vibrant, or maybe a more pastel yellow. And so that I'm going to kind of integrate in more close to the mountains than anywhere else. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the corner of my foam brush and I'm going to just mix in a little bit of this orange color. And I'm going to make it just a little bit lighter with just a corner of that white. So you can kind of see how we're just sort of making a whole other round of colors with just adding white to the colors we mixed. So that's just a little bit lighter orange, and that I'm going to start working in the sky in just a really loose way of making mixed marks, and I'll show you how I do that. So what I'm doing with that mixed mark making is all I'm doing is I'm taking the edge of this brush right here, and I'm holding it at an angle like this, and I'm sort of dotting it down the edge of the brush, or the edge of the canvas, or the surface of the canvas rather. And a lot of times once I do that, it'll make this line, and then I'll pull it down so it has sort of like a wispy look to it. And so what I'll do, just to make it easier so you guys can see it, is I'll take the canvas off the easel and do it closer so you can actually see that technique. This way. So, do it over here. So I'm just holding the brush at a diagonal like this, and I'm dotting down the canvas, and then I'm pulling it down like that. And that's a lot of what I do with this brush. I do it horizontally like I just did that way and pulled it down. You could go up this way, and you don't necessarily have to pull it down if you'd like. You can go up and down like that. It's just a really fun way to use this brush and make a bunch of different mixed marks. And also, it kind of helps to add different layers to it. So that's what I'm doing with that orange color. So you can kind of see in this that there's those marks all over this painting. This is obviously finished, so some of these beginning layers that we're doing now, you can't necessarily see, but you can see how I've used that brush in these finishing layers as well with all the different colors. So that's kind of the technique that we're going to be using, and that's why I love that brush. I just love that you can play around with it so much and make so many different marks and stuff with it. So I'm going to just continue on with that orange a little bit. And fill in a little bit more of the sky with it, and then we'll transition to the mountains and let that dry, and then we'll go back to the sky and add another layer. So I'm going to just use a little bit more of that orange. And if you feel like your paint isn't as fluid as you want it to be, it's not going on as smooth, just get your brush a little bit wet and kind of move that paint around on your palette a little bit more, which is what I just did. So I'm just going to add a little bit more white to that orange. Awesome. So I'm just going to call this guy good for now.
I like it.
And we'll let it dry because that's just our first layer. And again, it's super, super loose. And we're doing several layers, so as long as it's not super thick, should dry totally in time. So now another thing that's going to be super important. Typically, I have several of these that I'm using at any time, so I don't have to rinse them out. But in this instance, because there's another
Oh.
Typically, I don't have to rinse this out. However, because we only have one, we want to rinse this out really good because now we're going to be working with our cool colors. So typically, I usually have a warm color brush and a cool color brush. But because we only have one, you're going to want to rinse this out really good. So then when we go to use our blue or our purple, any residual orange in here is probably going to make that color not look the way you want it to look. So even depending on whatever shade or hue that you have going on. So I'm going to rinse this out really good. And again, using your paper towel to kind of check how clean it is works really well. And these typically when you rinse them out, they're going to be really wet. So just make sure that you kind of get it nice and dry. So when we go to use our cool colors, it won't get your paint really soupy or really, really fluid. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rinse my brush out in this water, and then I'm going to get brand new water. So then that way the color that my water is right now, which actually is brown, it won't change the color of my cool colors that I'm going to use. Is everyone doing good as far as using that brush the way that I was showing?
Everyone should be unmuted, or you have the ability to unmute yourself. Since we're kind of at the halfway point, halftime, if you want to make a comment or any questions, now's a really good time.
What about extender? Like
a medium.
Remember that stuff we got on the last one?
So that I'll be honest, I have never used. I've seen it in the art store and stuff. But for me,
Just water?
I tend to use just water, especially because I use a spray bottle a lot in my first layer. So that's what's making my paint really fluid, but directly on the canvas. Whereas, and I think with abstract painting specifically for me, the spray bottle works really well for me in keeping my paint as fluid as I want it to be, whether it's spraying directly on the canvas for that drippiness, or just keeping my palette as wet as I want it to be. Typically, I don't ever want the paint on my palette to be so fluid that it's gonna drip if I pick my palette up. Usually I'm wanting that to happen on the canvas. So that's just my particular process. But I have seen, I guess the only medium that I've ever used is actually to make my paint thicker.
Yeah.
So I've used a heavy gloss gel before to add to my paint. And that, it doesn't change, it's clear. And you can mix it with your paint, and then when you put it on the canvas, it can add a really nice gloss texture that makes it look almost like oil. So in that instance, that's the only time I've ever used like another medium with my paint, was to make it thicker and to create texture. I've never actually used the medium where it makes it more fluid or keeps your paint from drying.
Yeah.
Because I will say also that I typically paint pretty fast. So I also don't necessarily, water works well for me in keeping my paint as wet as I need it to be.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. The more art that you do over time, the more you realize it's kind of like choose your own path. Like there's certain tools and materials like medium or extender or thickener that some people use all the time and some people never use. I personally paint really, really slow, so sometimes I do use a medium to make acrylic paint last longer.
I love how that's so different
Yeah.
for us. Like,
Yeah, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I really love just in general about just in the fact, so like Megan has been amazing in she set this whole thing up and has been helping me so much, and just in general, she's an amazing artist in her own right.
Thank you.
We actually just did a art trade.
Yeah, it's really fun.
We traded paintings, which was really amazing, but we are very different kinds of artists.
Yeah, so it's all like art is really interesting because it's like whatever you want to do is the right thing to do. If you ever did art in college or like on any kind of like, you know, like professional level, you might have professors or someone that told you this is the only way to do it.
Totally.
But I've learned that is not true.
Exactly.
There's no one way to do anything.
It really is, more than anything that I have learned, I really feel like it's all an experiment. You just keep experimenting and trying different things until you find something that really like resonates with you, or that you really love how that happened. And yeah, just kind of going back to like, she paints very slow and has
too slow.
And amazingly, like the painting that I have is an incredible painting of Lone Peak and an owl, and the detail is just incredible. It's so like precise and beautiful, and you can tell like my way of painting is very loose and very just like, you know, a lot of it is just smushing around paint and seeing what happens. So I think it's so awesome to have, you know, to be friends with someone who has such different art that is equally, like, is amazing as well. And I think, yeah, it's just all about experimenting, you know, like each person comes to find that aside from any sort of classes or anything that you've taken, you really just have to experiment and try different things until you find something that really you like. And so a lot of people might really love working with that medium because it helps them, you know, because it probably, you know, it helps your paint not dry because you're, you know, getting really detailed and really,
when you're taking a month to make a painting,
intricate, and it's just amazing what you can do having that, the life of your paint extended in that way. Whereas for me, I'm working on multiple pieces at a time and, you know, using a spray bottle, and there's paint everywhere and things are dripping. And so I typically don't need that type of thing. So everyone's different, and it's all just an experiment, I think, is something that I've learned.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully everyone's brush is pretty clean. So you can kind of see, so this is what my paper towel looked like before. And then the second round of rinsing it, this is what it looks like now. So you can, that's how the paper towel is just a really great test of like seeing how clean your brush is. So you're going to want it to be pretty clean. And then I'll show you again. So because my paint is maybe just a little, I just want to keep it wet, you know, not drippy or anything, just wet. I'm just going to spray my palette a little bit just to keep it nice and wet. And then now we're going to dive into the mountains. So I'm just going to take that blue color that dark blue color that we have. And I'm going to dip my brush, still using the foam brush, dip my brush in the water that is now, I have brand new water because my water was sort of brownish. So if you haven't done that, or if your water is sort of a weird color, you might want to switch that out. But that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get my brush wet and start moving, kind of getting that blue color a little bit more fluid. So just like that. And then same kind of thing I'm going to do that I did with the yellow. I'm just going to very loosely outline my mountains with this dark blue and keep it just super loose. And if you want, you can do an all, solid mountains for the moment. For me, I'm going to keep it just a little bit more open.
That looks very satisfying.
It is. So the other thing, just in the way I paint, is keeping it really loose. I just feel it's just so like freeing and yeah, I guess what Megan said, just really satisfying just to kind of like go crazy on your canvas, and just kind of smush paint around and not necessarily have to be really precise about it. I think when I first started painting, I was very perfectionistic, and over the years, I've really found that for me, I get so much more joy out of just playing around with the paint on the canvas and not necessarily being really perfect with it, at least not in the beginning. In the end, I'll definitely start fine-tuning things, especially if I'm painting something more representational. But in this instance, when it's the first layers, just have fun and play around. I really do feel like a kid a lot of times when I'm starting paintings because it's just about having fun. The other thing that's really great about these brushes is that when you use the edge of it, it's really great for kind of defining those lines, especially with mountains. So you can kind of see maybe right here that I sort of got a little bit of my blue into the yellow sky, and that is totally fine. Again, like if that made a little bit of a green, we're going to end up painting over that anyway, so if you kind of mixed a color and you didn't mean to, that's totally fine. All right, so now I've got most of my paintings covered. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing I did with my yellow. We used that just normal blue out of the tube. I'm going to take a little bit of the white and mix it in with the blue. So I'm going to get my brush wet, just a tiny bit. And then I'm just going to take a corner of my brush and dip it in the white and then mix that in with my blue. And that'll make a nice light blue. And then I'm going to kind of focus on filling in those, what I didn't fill in on the canvas with that light blue. So it's just a little bit lighter blue than what we were using initially. So then the next thing I'm going to do, just to make it extra fun, is I'm going to still take the same brush and then I'm going to start using my purple. And that's how we're going to use the purple the way we use the orange in the sky. So super loose, and that's when I'm going to start making those marks that I was using. And it's just that original purple color that we mixed is that it's sort of going to be darker, because then again I'm going to add a little bit of white to it after we use the initial darker purple, and that'll create some contrast with the colors. So much lighter than it is.
I know.
You could just, however you want to use that brush, you could go diagonally if you want.
Ooh.
You could go, a lot of times too, what I'll do is I'll take the corner of the brush, like that, and I'll dip it in my paint. And then you can just dot it down your canvas like this. And it makes a, might not be able to see that. It makes sort of a triangle shape right there. So that's just another fun way you can use the brush. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of white to my purple. So same brush, just take a little corner of that white into the purple. So this is a little bit lighter. And to be honest, mine's a little bit gray of a purple, just because of the colors, the initial colors that I had. And I'm just making mine just a little bit lighter, just to kind of create that nice contrast. So you want, because you want it to show up on top of that dark blue. And I'm really just trying to cover any of the white that I had in that kind of loose first layer. So now, before we do anything else, or before we go back to the sky, all I'm going to do is I'm going to, same brush that we were using with the purple, I'm going to go back to my light blue. I'm going to take a little bit more white, mix that in with my blue just a little bit, really loosely, and then I'm going to go just to the tops of my mountains. And that's going to highlight the peaks in a way that you can kind of see in here, kind of makes that nice contrast between the outline that we're going to do and then also just the rest of the mountains. So that's what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to add that light blue just right to the tips of the peaks right there. And then I'm just going to take that same light blue and just really lightly do some hints or subtle, some highlights in the mountains just to kind of tie that all together. Hopefully. So you can kind of see that that light blue is right up here in the mountains. And then there's just little hints of it here and throughout the canvas. And that's just kind of tying it all in, making it sort of cohesive, but you're really just trying to highlight the tops of the mountains to kind of create that contrast when we start adding the outline of the mountains with that dark blue. So hopefully everyone is...
That's
awesome.
We're all good. Yeah.
Perfect. Cool. So now we're going to go back to the sky, and then, let's see. We're just going to fill in the rest of that white that we have left. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Boop. So now, again, you're going to want to rinse this brush really, really good. Especially now because we're working from dark to light. And so if you don't have all the blue out of this brush, then it's going to make your yellow green, which you may not want in the sky. So I'm going to rinse this brush out really good. Maybe do like, we're on par, but maybe do showing at like 5:45.
Yeah, that's probably fine.
Okay.
Show and tell. Yeah, I think that'll be perfect.
So I went ahead and grabbed a new paper towel because mine were pretty wet. So this is the first rinsing. So you can tell it's still very dirty.
If you guys really like this process, I think Heather would probably recommend picking up a couple extra foam brushes so you can have a warm brush and a cool brush and not have to constantly be cleaning and making sure things aren't going to blend together too much. And luckily those foam brushes are like practically free. They're very, very, very affordable.
This is what I'm normally working with. This is how many I have.
Just a couple.
Just a couple. So because my water is very blue, you can see it's very blue. So because we're all at home and probably have a sink, I'm actually going to go rinse this brush out in the sink because my water is so blue, even though I'm trying to rinse it out, it's not ever going to get as clean as I want it to get because my water is dirty. So I'm going to switch my water out one more time, and that should be the last time we have to do that. So I will be right back. Sometimes I feel silly when I rinse these out. I feel like, oh, they're so cheap, I should just throw them away. But it's like I saved them.
I feel like they would last forever. Like they would probably last for like 50 years.
I save them until like they're literally on their last leg or paint has dried on them.
I'm snooping on everyone's who has their video turned on. It looks like most people are either chilling or still painting. Does anyone have any questions since it's a good time? I'll turn the mute off for a sec.
Here you go. Mute is off. Oh no, wait, why mute? We need the camera on.
Hold on. Where'd the mute go? Reclaim, oh, what? Oh. Now everyone is unmuted. If anyone has any questions, shout them out.
We're doing good? Awesome.
Yeah, we're good.
Awesome, perfect. So now that my brush is totally clean and it's not going to make my yellow green at all, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually mix a little more white into my yellow and then move that into my orange. So basically we're going to make a really, really light orange with the mixture of those colors. So I'm going to take my little bit of yellow and a little bit of white, and I'm going to bring it over here to my light orange right here and kind of mix it in. And if it's not quite as fluid as you want it to be, just get your brush a little bit wet. And yeah, we're just trying to make a really light orange color. Mine's actually like a peach color. But again, we're just kind of trying to make without mixing a totally different color. We're just kind of trying to pull off the colors that we have to create more colors for the canvas. So now that I have my really light orange, you can see it there, it's kind of a peachy color. I'm going to try and fill in the rest of those kind of the white that's showing on the canvas with this color, but also just, again, really loosely.
One day. What you doing now?
Whoever, someone's unmuted and they're saying funny stuff. I'm not sure who it is though. Who is it? How? Wait, I don't know.
So you can kind of see how that's adding just a different color to the canvas. And I'm just trying to cover all of the white spots on my canvas that are left. And I'm just working in a little bit of white and a little bit of yellow into that peachy color that I made. And we're really just trying to keep the lightest colors right around the mountains, because after we're done using this light peach orange or light peach yellow color, we're going to start adding in a darker orange and maybe even a little bit of red, similar to this one. You can kind of see how that sort of frames the sky with the darker colors on the outer edges. You can kind of throw in a little bit of those mix marks too. Nice. Okay. So that's gonna be the end of the lighter colors in my sky. I'm really liking the way that looks to me. Yeah. And then I'm gonna start working in those darker colors of the reds and oranges. So I'm gonna take that orange color that we mixed. I'm just going to pull, same brush, we're going to pull a little bit of that on there. And we're going to start, again, just making another layer of those marks, but I'm going to focus on the outer edges of the canvas, sort of create more of that sunset vibe that we're going for. So now I'm going to take a little bit of the red. I'm just going to pull a tiny bit into that orange to make it a little bit darker. And I'm only going to go on the edge of the canvas, just to kind of frame it a little bit. So you can kind of see how I've done that. So it makes it a little bit more of a framed, yeah. So there's just the darker colors on the outer, and then the lightest is right next to the mountains. So now we're going to get really interesting, and we're going to take a little bit of our orange and we're going to put it in the mountains. So you can kind of see in here, or in the image that you have that you're looking at, you can see that there's a little bit of that orange and yellow in the mountains. So just as highlights, and then you can also see in opposite, there's a little bit of the blue in the sky. You could definitely do that if you want. I'm going to do that just because I like sort of tying in both the sky and the mountains together, and it sort of makes it one cohesive piece. But if you don't want to do that, you just want to keep those warm colors together and the cool colors, go with that as well. But I'm just going to do just a super light layer, just really light highlights of that orange color in the mountains.
How much do you think about the placement of what you're doing when you do it?
Very little. So when I'm thinking about making those marks, I'm literally just like, mostly I think I'm thinking about contrast. I'm thinking about like where I will say it's very easy to go overboard with these marks.
I can see that.
I've done that in mini paintings. So I think just in general, depending on how much you like it or how much you don't, it's easy to go overboard with this particular element that you're adding to a painting. But I'm really not thinking too hard about where my placement of those at all. I'm just kind of just going with the flow. But within this respect, it's mostly just a highlight. So I'm going to call that good, and so you can kind of see that there's just highlights a little bit here and there, kind of mixing with that light blue and dark blue. So now we're going to wash our brush one more time. And really the only reason why we're doing that is because we're going to put some blue in the sky. And if you don't want to do that, definitely you don't need to wash your brush out. But I do, so I'm going to wash my brush really quickly. And in this case, it doesn't necessarily need to be super, super clean because we're just doing highlights. So, and we're working cool, or we're working warm to cool, so it shouldn't be as big of a deal.
Barbara, I'm not sure what your question means. Light and thin or light whitish? Let's see. Barbara, I'm going to track you down and unmute. What's your question?
Thin paint or light? So you're saying light in paint like it's thin, or light in paint in color?
Both, I would say. So mostly light in color. So right now, we are just kind of more doing highlights with those mixed marks to kind of tie both the sky and the mountains together. So you don't want your paint to be super thick, but you definitely want it to be a little bit lighter. And mostly just for that nice contrast that we're trying to go for. So, for instance, actually, I'm going to need to put a little bit more white on my palette. Probably like 15 minutes. Okay. Okay. So,
Your towel on the table. That's great. That's a good idea.
It's a sculptural piece at this point. So now I'm just going to take a little bit of that light blue that I was using earlier, and I just had to put a little bit more white on my palette. And I really don't want a ton of paint on my brush because, again, this is really just a highlight in the sky. So that's about as much paint as I have on my brush. It's really not a ton. because I'm really just using the tip of the brush to create those lines. So you can kind of see it's pretty light in there. So yeah, just kind of tying it all together. And then while we're working with the sky, since I am wanting to do a moon instead of a sun, which in this case, in this one, was the sun, I'm going to do, or it doesn't even need to be a moon. I'm just wanting it to be blue instead of yellow. So I'm going to take that same light blue, and we're going to use that same foam brush. And this is actually really great for making a pretty much perfect circle. So what I'll do is I'll take the canvas off the easel so you can kind of see that better. So I had my sketch of my circle right up here somewhere. So I'm just going to put it right about here. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to take the brush, let's see, there we go, and I'm going to put it on the canvas, and then I'm just going to turn it.
Whoa. Whoa.
And it literally makes a pretty much perfect circle. You kind of have to play around with the shape a little bit. And if you want to make it bigger, all you have to do is just kind of push the brush outwards a little bit, but it's really, really great at making a circle. So I'm actually going to make mine a little bit lighter, so I'm going to use a little bit more white, just to kind of make it contrast with the blue that I have in the sky already.
I've never made a circle like that. That's what I'm gonna do from now on.
It just makes it super. It's just we'll kind of go over it. We'll outline it with a dark blue.
I feel like that's like physics or something.
But it's just super.
Yeah, it's so much easier that way.
Mm-hmm. So you kind of want to fine tune your circle a little bit, but it doesn't have to be perfect because we're gonna outline it. So there's my moon. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to take that smaller brush that I have. So I'll use this brush that most people have. If you don't have a brush that's at least this small, then you can use the tip of you can try and use the tip of this. This will also work really well to outline the mountains in a dark blue. Just you want to use that edge of the foam brush. But I'm going to use my more detailed brush, which is this one. And I'm going to actually get a little bit more blue paint because I'm about out. So I'm just a tiny bit of blue paint. I'm going to get my brush a little bit wet. I'm going to get it nice and fluid. And then I'm going to take a tiny bit of black, the smallest amount of black. You can kind of see that's the black on there, just a tiny bit. Maybe a little bit more. And that's just going to make my blue a little bit darker than it was out of the tube. And now we're just going to outline the mountains in this dark blue. And in here, in this piece, you can see how I made, there was a ridge line that I drew all the way down, actually in all of them. And that kind of gives the illusion of sort of foreground, background, or distance. So that kind of helps with if you want it to look like there's sort of a mountain range behind a mountain. So that's what I'm going to do again with this one. So I'm going to take just the edge of my brush right here. And I'm mostly just outlining the mountains. I'm going to make this one go all the way this way. Same thing with that one. And I'm really just trying to get a nice crisp point to my mountains. Usually using a much smaller brush for this. There we go. So now, because in here, I kind of want to do, I like my highlight on this mountain especially, just a little bit brighter. So I'm just going to go in after I made that outline of the mountains with my lighter blue and this foam brush and just highlight this front mountain a little bit more with that light blue. So that's our mountains. Yay! So now pretty much all I'm going to do is I'm going to outline the moon with that same dark blue. And that, again, is just going to help create contrast. And really, the smallest brush you have works best. I would typically be using a smaller brush than this, more of like a pointed brush. But because everyone has something more similar to this, I'm going to use this. And mostly I'm just going to use the edge, this right here, and kind of just move it or rotate it around the circle. And that should give you the best way to create that line. Kind of like that. There we go. So now that we have our mountains and our moon all set, okay. So now we're going to take our green. We're going to use our lonely green that we haven't used yet. And one of the things that I found along with this brush is that this works really well for making trees. So I'm going to take the same, it has blue on it, that's not a big deal. We're going to work it with our green. It might make your green a little bit blue if you want, and you want to have it be more of that truer green. You can rinse this out or use a different brush if you have one. For time's sake, I'm just going to use this one that has blue already on it. But I'm going to mix it in with my green. And because it was a lighter blue and I didn't have a ton of paint on my brush, it shouldn't change the color of the green that much. And I'm just going to kind of get that green pretty fluid. And then I'm going to start adding in my trees over that blue of my mountains. If the blue starts mixing a little bit, it's totally fine. We're just going to kind of do the basic outline of the trees, and then we're going to fill it in and detail them with that smaller brush. So in my sketch that I remember that I had painted over, I had a tree here and a tree here, and then I had a smaller tree right here. So I'm just going to kind of really roughly make those tree shapes with this brush. And the beauty of the tip of this brush really makes it easy to do that. And I'm keeping it pretty loose because, like I said, we're going to go in with that smaller brush and do some detail work on there. And I'm going to do my tree over here. And I'm just using the tip of that brush to kind of create the branches of the tree. Awesome. So that's about all I'm going to use that brush for the trees. And then I'm going to take that same brush that we were using to do that detail work on the mountains and the mountains and the moon or sun. And I'm going to take a little bit of, let's see. I'm going to take a tiny bit of black and add it to my green, just to make it a little bit darker. And that's going to kind of create a little bit of contrast with the color of green that we have on there already. And then I'm going to start filling in those branches just a little bit more, really loosely.
I don't know if you agree, but whenever I paint trees, especially pine trees, I try to make it as random as possible, because if it's too organized, it looks kind of not realistic. Like, pine trees are much less organized in real life than you think they are. Like, when you see a little kid draw a pine tree, it's like a triangle.
Yes.
But then if you look at a pine tree in real life, it's all weird and all over the place. So the more random and the less you think about it, I think is the better. I don't know. I don't want to speak for you, but
no, totally.
That's how I think.
That really is true. It definitely, the more loose you can be and less perfect, especially with trees, the better they look. Or the more real, I guess.
Yeah. These are not country club trees.
No.
They're Montana trees.
Montana trees, that's right. There we go. So I just stayed super loose with that. And then literally all we're going to do now is we're going to take the rest of our green and I'm going to add a little bit of white to it. And that's what we're going to outline our trees with. And this you want it to be pretty different of a shade from what we are working with, because again, they're going to outline the trees, so you want it to be have a good contrast. So I'm making mine pretty light, you can see there, compared to what we were working with before. And then I'm literally just going to do the outline to mine. And if your lighter green starts mixing with any of the blue that's behind it that may not be dry, that's totally fine. I think for me, I kind of like the way it looks. That's one. And I'm just going to take this brush and use it kind of like I was using with the foam, or using the foam brush, and make a little bit of those mixed marks just to kind of add texture to the trees.
Yeah, it kind of ties it together, like using the same kind of brush strokes that she did in the sky and the mountains and the trees, ties it all together really nice.
It kind of just makes it cohesive.
Yeah. This is like the same person made all the parts.
Yeah.
Sweet.
And I think we're pretty good.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
Let's see. So I'm going to unmute everyone and see what we all think. Oh, wait. There, now everyone's unmuted.
So I'll take this off just so everyone can kind of see. So that's how my trees ended up. So pretty loose. And you can see how those marks kind of tie in with the rest of the painting. And then also how that lighter blue kind of highlights and creates contrast in the mountains.
It's pretty.
So if people are kind of wrapping up, we would love to do a show and tell so we can see what everyone's made. So like this virtual format's really weird for artists who teach because we can't see what you're doing and it's really nerve-wracking to not know what's going on. So we would love to see what you have going on.
Yeah, totally. Normally at paint parties, I really enjoy walking around and seeing everyone's process and seeing, you know, what people, how everyone's is turning out, and in this sort of format, you really don't get that feedback. So it's really, if you're willing to, I'd love to be able to see what everyone's looks like. And one of the things that I always say at my paint parties is there is no, yay, oh my gosh, they turned so good. There is no negativity. Like, we all have that inner critic. It's really hard to quiet it, even as an artist that practices all the time. And I've learned to live with it, but yes, just.
So maybe if you guys don't mind, I'll go down the line here looking at all the participants and maybe call you out and ask you if you want to share yours because we're curious. So Amber, you're first on my list.
Oh.
Even if you're not done. And so something for me as a very slow painter, I would probably not be done right now. So if you're showing something that's like in process, that's okay.
Totally fine.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like especially with this process, I paint rather quickly, but you can make it your own. So even if it's not done, I'd love to see kind of where you're at and you know where it's going so far.
My cheese needs to be on my outline.
All right, Amber, do you want to show yours?
Sure.
I'm gonna go down the line just for our sake to kind of be able to know what's going on. So when I call on you.
I feel like I still want to keep working on it, but
Cool.
this is what I have right now.
Oh yeah, it looks awesome.
Oh, I love it.
The colors are really nice. I like the
Definitely.
mountain colors a lot. They're like a nice, like soft pastel-y color.
Yeah, I feel like you're, at least on our end, your mountains look a little bit more purple.
Doesn't it?
Which
The color.
I love. Purple's my favorite color. So
Purple's a good
Yeah,
color.
like how it
yeah,
blends
no, I
it
love
up.
it. It looks great.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, Leanne, Lorenz. Oh yeah, double. Oh, fun.
Woohoo! Yeah.
Did you guys feel like since you were working together, did you like kind of get inspiration from each other, or like how did that work when you were doing it together?
Oh my gosh.
Always.
Always.
Oh, there we go.
They look amazing.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love the difference between the sun versus the moon, or like the yellow orb and the blue orb. Even that alone creates a different feeling, which is really cool. And I love how they turn out so different. That's my favorite thing. So those are awesome.
Yeah, that's so fun.
Yeah.
Okay, next on our little lineup here, Jeanette. Show it!
Soften mine up a little bit. So
It looks awesome.
Oh yeah, I love how the sun is like highlighted with that really bright yellow behind it.
Yeah.
So, and then I did the trees. I did my own thing with the
Yeah,
trees.
no, they look great. Yeah, I like how
I
they're.
want to soften it a little bit. So
Mhm. I like how the trees are more prominent. I like that. There's more of a contrast there, which is nice.
Yeah, it's a strong foreground. Okay, Barbara. Oh, beautiful.
Oh wow.
I like the slope.
oh my gosh! Can you show that?
Yeah, your relief, your like elevation on the mountains is really dramatic. I like that a lot. And your sky, it looks like it's on fire.
Yeah, the
It's
sky
awesome.
is awesome.
It's really, really cool.
Sweet. All right, Chris Hensley.
I'm really embarrassed because my ADD did not let it flow tonight.
It takes a while to let the flow thing happen. Oh no, that's awesome.
No, it looks great. It really does. Is it really wet? Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just suffered tonight.
I feel
despite my distraction.
I feel like there's a lot of purple in your mountains too, though, which I really like.
Well, I worked at JMU for 5 years, so.
Oh yeah. No, I will say that it was a challenge for me to only work with the primary colors. Typically, I work with a ton of different colors and straight out of the tube, so I don't do a ton of color mixing. If anything, I'm adding white or black to a color. So this in itself was a challenge for me as well, just to have that limited color palette. So I love the purple.
Kind of crazy here. Anyway, a friend of mine from Montana drove down with me, and because Dennis was driving a separate truck, and so I drove our truck and pulled a trailer, and so a friend rolled with me, and she just left this morning. And then one of Dennis's cousins from Wyoming drove a truck down and pulled one of our cars down. I mean, we had this caravan of all this stuff. Plus, we had a moving truck that, came down. So we had a lot of stuff, and it's in this house. And I don't know how long it's going to take us to straighten it out. A long time, I'm sure. Long time.
Yeah. But this new world that we live in apparently makes everything weird and different. It's kind of fun to challenge ourselves, but it's also just challenging and weird.
Yes, agreed.
All right. Tim? I don't think you're Tim,
my
but...
name's Cassie, by the
Yeah.
way.
No worries.
Yeah. So I had a little bit of inspiration.
Oh, nice.
Oh, I love it.
I love the single mountain. It
It's-
looks like Lone Peak.
It does.
Yeah. Is
I
it?
tried to do big sky. Yeah, I tried to do big sky.
It looks... that is the silhouette for sure. You
Yeah,
got
no,
it.
it's very Lone Peak-esque. It looks awesome. I like how I like the way your sky is blended is really unique. I like that a lot.
Thanks.
It's really neat.
That is
Yeah.
really
Yeah, it was
So
fun.
why don't we talk to Barb and see what works better, but why don't we try for Saturday or Sunday night for them?
No, the trees too, I like how they're really prominent. Like mine, I think are a little bit more, if I were to like work on it more, I would make my trees a little bit like more, pop a little bit more, which I think yours are doing.
Okay. Leanne, and friend, you are next. Oh yeah, nice.
Ooh, I like the red in the sky.
Oh yeah, that one's like a fire sky.
Oh, they look so different.
Yeah.
I love that. I love it when they look so different. Because it really is, like, I really feel like people's inner creativity comes through, like even if you're painting the same image. So it's really, really neat. That's my favorite part. Hill! Woo! Yeah!
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that looks awesome. I like how dark your
You really
moon is,
blended
too.
the colors.
The sky was yellow and the sun was blue.
To be fair, she has been to a couple of my paint parties, so she kind of knows the process a
She's
little
got
bit.
the background.
I was gonna say it's taken some practice, and I feel like I'm improving slightly each time.
Nice.
I love it. It looks awesome.
Katie?
Beautiful. He's gone to so many.
That's inspiration. Fan Mountain.
Ooh. Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
see fan for sure.
Totally. Oh, I love that. It's so cool to kind of take your own things that inspire your own image and make it into that kind of apply it in this abstract way is really cool. I like that.
Okay. Madison. Oh, nice.
Wow, yeah. I like how the lighter colors show up in your mountains a lot.
Yeah, I like that. We'll do some more with the trees, I think. But
Mhm.
yeah.
And you have time. Like, this does not end now. You can totally keep going.
Yeah, definitely. If you like keep going, a lot of times that happens to me when I start painting, and then like hours and hours go by,
Mhm.
and I'm like, oh wow. So I'm sure that could happen to you as well.
Okay, Linda and Savannah.
We've been talking. We're taking everybody's inspiration ahead of us. And
Oh, yeah.
going with it.
Woo! Oh,
that's
those are
a
great.
Guy. Oh, I love it.
Aw.
Actually on camera. I love that.
It looks awesome.
It does. Again, like I like how different the yellow sun or the orange sun looks compared to the blue sun. It looks awesome. You guys everyone really got the sunset vibe down. Mm-hmm.
We're saying it looks better on camera. I'm now holding it up like this.
It looks amazing from here.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Must be the wide angle.
Yeah.
All right, Becky.
It's like a good mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like good lighting.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Oh, Becky, that's beautiful.
I like your highlights in the mountains. Those look awesome.
Yeah, that is
gorgeous.
great. I like the different colors in the moon too, or the sun,
Oh,
whatever it is.
wow.
Yeah, that's great. And so I think if I were to keep working on mine, I would do what you did with your trees and highlight them a little bit more.
Okay, Carol.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yes. Oh yeah, it looks great.
That's
Hold
it.
it up a little higher. Yes.
First time, so.
No, I love the your mountain, like the mountain line. I love how sporadic it is. Like it's not so perfect, you know?
Oh, good.
I really like that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yay, well thank you for joining us.
Yeah, Crystal.
Oh yeah, so we got three. So this is Jody.
Oh, nice.
Yay!
Awesome.
Oh, I see purple in there. I love it.
This is
Oh, nice.
Oh, I like the trees. I
The
like
trees
how
look
they're
great. Yeah.
I like how they're both like
I
popping
really
up.
like it.
Mhm.
It is. It's interesting. It's.
and then this is Sarah.
Oh yeah. Oh, I like the outline
Oh,
of the
yeah.
mountains.
I like the purple in the mountains too.
Mhm. I love all the purple.
Did that real.
Yay, I'm so glad all three of you were together. That's so great.
Yeah,
Is
I think we have to take another class. What's in between?
Is Jody? So I see another Jody that doesn't have their screen turned on. Is
Yes.
Jody with Crystal? Is that the same Jody, or is that a different person?
We asked her.
I'm unmuting other Jody without the screen. I don't know.
Jody was with me. So
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay.
Okay,
Jody should-
awesome. Is there anyone else that we didn't see? Linda?
Yes, we have our two kids doing it with us. So do you want to see what they did?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely.
Always.
Come here. Come here.
Wait, which screen? Oh, that one.
Yeah, I love seeing the kids' artwork too. In fact, I feel like they have a easier time with creativity than us adults.
Mm-hmm. Ah!
Yes,
High fives.
Oh,
Boom, boom, boom,
wow.
that looks so great.
That's so fun. Yes.
Oh my gosh, I love
Aw.
the mountains in that one too. Are so cool. I love how like unique.
Those
they
are the Tetons.
totally.
Yeah.
They look like the Tetons.
Those
For
are
sure.
awesome.
That was super fun for them.
Good.
Oh, I'm so glad you're all
Yay.
together doing that.
That's such a fun
It's-
thing.
It really is. It's so cool to like for families and friends to get together and create. I think it's such a different activity that's like so awesome. The energy is great. That's
Mhm.
I miss. This is
Doing good.
so great. It's not quite the same as real life, but it's so awesome.
Is there anyone else who's being sneaky out there? No?
Lots of giggles.
All right. Okay.
Yay!
Well, I guess that kind of wraps it up. I just made what?
Hear that?
I don't know.
Wraps it up.
Oh!
Oh,
Savannah, thank you.
Oh, Sav, you're awesome.
So I did put
wrapping it up.
I put on the chat, if you would like to leave Heather a tip directly, that is an option. In the chat option, I put her Venmo names. If you would like to do that, that's an option. Just throwing it out there. It's great to support our local artists, especially when they go out of our way to make these awesome opportunities for us to be a little bit less stir crazy and a little bit less cabin fevery, and to be creative and to have fun with each other even when we're not really allowed to. So that's an option, and you can find that in the group chat.
Oh, it is, Linda.
It's been just so great to, this is so different than the Facebook Live thing that I did, because you can actually see people's faces, and again, like, it's not quite the same as a normal paint party, but it's just so great to have that, like, back and forth thing going on, and I'm just so grateful, one, Savannah, to have the opportunity to share my creative process with everyone, and so, like, for the Arts Council for facilitating this, and Megan, you know, making it happen, but also just for you guys showing up, and just, it takes a lot of bravery to just show up and create, and yeah, and and
cheers. Boom.
Cheers. Hopefully I did okay with the ums. I think the beer thing works.
You did pretty good, yeah. Well, hopefully we have the opportunity to do this in real life soon. I'm going to drink this beer a little bit.
But yeah, thank you so much for all being here. I'm just so grateful, and I'm so happy to have seen all your pieces. It's so awesome to see how different they all are. It's awesome.
Yeah, and we'll probably, from the Arts Council of Big Sky, we say thank you. We hopefully will be offering more of these classes throughout the summer, even as our situation in Montana changes with things opening. We're going to try to figure out how to adapt these programs so maybe people can do them in real life, maybe some people can do them virtually. We're going to keep working on that, so if you have any requests or suggestions or ideas, you can send them my way at education@bigskyarts.org. We would love to hear from you, and we want to keep doing this, and hopefully we can keep doing this in real life really soon.
Yes, as soon as we are able, so currently usually I have my paint parties at Beehive Basin Brewery, and we are open. However, we are limited to a certain number of people in the tap room, and so it's really not feasible to have them currently as of yet, but as soon as we are able to do that, I will be setting up some paint parties and advertising those online and through my website as well. So hopefully sometime soon, as things start reopening and things kind of, everyone is still staying healthy. So cheers to all of you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Cheers. All right, we're going to do end meeting, keep painting, keep having fun with each other.
Happy Wednesday.
That was really liquidy.
All right, bye everyone.
Bye.
Sweet.
Oh
great.
Gosh.
Woo! I know, do you just feel like I've just been talking so much, like, blah, 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 blah.
Well, I feel like it's rare that I talk that much, like,
in like life,
consistently.
yeah, totally. How do I videotaped it.